Hi, everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Chaffee on this Wednesday night, the 10th of October, on a historic day with respect to Hurricane Michael. Who would have thought late last week that we would be sitting here talking about a storm that really was either on the cusp of a Category 5 or may have just been briefly a Category 5? The old days, the pressure was part of the criteria for whether a storm was a Category 5 hurricane or not. And by pressure, it certainly was, because it had to be under 925 millibars. And this one, at its lowest point, got to 915, and it was at 919 at landfall. It is among the top five in terms of storms making landfall in the United States. In the Gulf of Mexico, I believe it might be the Gulf of Mexico, the U.S. coast. It may be the third strongest to ever hit land, and it's certainly the strongest hurricane ever to hit land on the Florida Panhandle. This came about, by the way, in the face of weather models that just did not handle things very well, and threw forecasters, including myself, for a bit of a loop. If you think back over the weekend, we talked about the fact that there was these very strong upper air winds in the Gulf of Mexico were going to relax, which they did, and that allowed a depression to form, and then it strengthened into a tropical storm, and those strong winds did relax somewhat, but there was a considerable amount of wind shear going on during its entire strengthening process getting into a hurricane. And that baffled a lot of forecasters because the strengthening just kept on going until it became a Category 3, and a major hurricane. The wind shear did ultimately relax to a point where this was able to continue strengthening, and even the Hurricane Center had said that they weren't sure why it was able to strengthen the way it did because of the moderate wind shear that existed. They theorized that it may have had to do with the fact that the storm's wind field was very large, and perhaps that was a mitigating factor in the strengthening process, working in the opposite direction of the wind shear, or at least making it less of a factor. Whatever it is, this wound up to be a really unprecedented event, as the Hurricane Center has put it, and the National Weather Service, I believe it's their quote, with regards to Michael. If you don't even bother to ask me whether they were going to retire the name, because I think that is already a done deal. Now, we have a number of other firsts, including the fact that this is the first time since the 1898 hurricane that went into Georgia as a major hurricane, that we have a major hurricane going into the state of Georgia and coming in from the southwest. Rather than, you would think that if it was going to happen, it would come in along the coast, the Atlantic coast side, which is a kind of a hard thing to do. It's to thread that needle there. But no, this one coming in from the southwest. Michael is well inland now, and it's still a major hurricane based on the last advisory. But we've got a lot of weather going on tonight with respect to that, so I'm going to just jump right to it here. And I'm going to start with the radar, the wide radar view. I'm going to I'm going to freshen this up right now. I'm going to make an attempt to move around to some of the local radars, but bear in mind that some of them are still down, and the weather now has improved. I did happen to see a live shot on one of the networks just a little while ago where in Destin, Florida, you were able to see the sunset. So the weather conditions along the immediate coast have improved. The landfall, by the way, was early this afternoon at Mexico Beach, which is east of Panama City. Came in with top winds of 155 miles an hour and a pressure of 919 millibars. A few hours before, while it was offshore, it had dropped to 915, which is the lowest pressure that it had in its life cycle. A very, very rare event to see a storm like this. And now, of course, still a major hurricane, even though the center is in southwest Georgia. I'm going to start, and by the way, the northern shield of the rain has moved up into North Georgia. I noticed some of you on the chat board from that area, talking about the fact that the rain bands have now come much further north. This is this is always a risk with the tropical systems, and why I've always said, the idea of trying to be fluid when it comes to the anticipations of the forecast. So let's see if any of these local radars are up. I had the wind, the observation map up, but the problem with it is that pretty much most of the observing stations in the path of the hurricane and either side of about maybe 50 to 75 miles are not reporting. And you can see this radar is also not reporting. So let's jump up to the Moody Air Force Base radar in Georgia, where we do have a tornado warning here in the red. I'm going to make sure you guys can see this a bit better, so I'm going to make it a little larger here. And you actually can see the center. It's probably filled in, but right there, that green spot with the yellow surrounding it, the center of circulation, which had moved into southeastern Alabama and now crossing into southwestern Georgia. Let's see if we can jump a little bit further to the west and see what that tells us. We'll get another perspective here. So while we're at the Fort Rucker, Alabama radar, and here we have we have enough until the very end, and then it just goes. So it looks like it's been down for a while, because you actually can see when the eye crossed Mexico Beach on this radar view right here at the first few frames, and then that's it. There's nothing after that. Let me try. We'll go northeast of there. All right, so we're back at Robbins Air Force Base. I'll try one more shot to the northeast. We'll go to the Columbia, South Carolina radar. So you've got some rains in eastern South Carolina, which is not really directly from Michael, and then you can see some of the bands on the western part of this radar view on the left, where we're seeing some of the outer bands. And they're getting, very strong gusty winds to over hurricane force well inland, which is why hurricane warnings are up so far inland. I can't remember the storm from sometime in the last couple of years. There was a hurricane that wound up, but we had tropical storm warnings up all the way up into northern Georgia, which was apparently a first time that Atlanta had tropical storm warnings up. But I don't remember which storm it was. So we have another unusual situation here with respect to the extent of the tropical storm warning. So I'm doing a lot of things on the fly tonight, folks. So just bear with me as I switch around and take a look at a few things. So we'll go to the Hurricane Center's website, and we'll bring up I think we'll start with the interactive warning. I'm going to open that up here, and we'll let it load. The forecast track, and we can see that didn't work too well. Now did it? Well, let's try that again. Now we got it. All right. So we'll put this on, and of course you can see all of this at nhc.noaa.gov. And here you've got the tropical storm, the hurricane warnings that are still up for parts of the Florida Panhandle and down around the Big Bend. And you can see the wind field of the orange is those are winds in excess of hurricane force, still a rather sizable area with a center that far inland. Now, tropical storm warnings have been extended up the Carolina coast. You can see them here all in purple, running from the Georgia coast all the way up through the North Carolina coast. And here's the forecast track of Michael. It is going to move off the coast in northeastern Virginia sometime Thursday night, and then it'll be off the Delaware coast, and from there it runs out to the northeast. So the question for areas north of, say, the Delmarva Peninsula, coastal New Jersey, central and South Jersey, and into Long Island, maybe even coastal into Connecticut, back to about New York City, is whether the northern fringe of the rains of Michael come into play when we get to later Thursday night into early Friday morning. It'll be close. I don't think it'll extend much further north and west. And we also have a weather front that's coming that's going to be producing its own round of downpours and thunderstorms later tomorrow afternoon and tomorrow evening. So here is the Weather Prediction Center, WPC. Here's their map of rainfall amounts from this, and you've got a band of 4 to 6 inch rains running from interior Georgia, and then a little bit of a gap for some reason. And then they have another area of 4 to 6 in the interior North Carolina, southeastern Virginia, and on up into the Delmarva Peninsula, just touching maybe Cape May, and the green is 2 to 4 inches. Again, some of this in the northern half of this forecast area is going to be is going to be enhanced by this next cold front that is coming on through. We do have a slew of watches and warnings that are in effect, so why don't we take a look at that. Very busy weather map tonight, and we'll get this up here. So all the area, the red, that's all tropical storm warnings that are up. And underneath all that, which you can't see, are the flash flood and flood watches that are up from southern New England, from Boston down to New York City, just outside in the Philly area to just outside Washington, D.C., and then through most of the southern half of Virginia, virtually all of North and South Carolina, and then you have flood watches up down into southern Georgia. On top of that, we've got tornado, actually a tornado watch that's in play at the moment. So I'm going to see if I'm going to bring up the severe weather map here. See if, let me shrink this out. Do I have it up on this board? I do not. So much for that. Oh, here we go. I thought I did. So here's the latest from SPC. So we've got this big tornado watch up, and it's been actually expanded out with, I guess, the chance for water spouts there covering the coastal waters down to almost Tampa, St. Pete, all of Georgia, northeastern Florida, easternmost Alabama, and into parts of South Carolina, all inside an enhanced risk of severe weather. And then you've got marginal risk up into North Carolina, almost to the Virginia border, and marginal risk up through Indiana, Ohio, and eastern Illinois. Again, that is with the next cold front that is coming on through. So let's move ahead and see what's going to happen with this. I'm still kind of marveled by the historic outcome here that has occurred today, and I want to talk about that a little bit more when I come back to you in the chat. We'll start with the NAM model tonight. Maps courtesy of tropicaltidbits.com, of course, and the center on the this is the late afternoon NAM run, so we have the absolute latest. Moving northeastward, so you can see how the rain on the northern shield there gets up into northern Georgia and even into eastern Tennessee. Again, it's a very, very fast movement here. We're not talking about anything that's stalling. So this is going to be 8 to 12 hours of heavy rains for some folks, and then it's done. Granted, it's going to be a lot of rain in those 8 to 12 hours. And at the same time, you've got this cold front. You can see the rain showers across Pennsylvania. This is tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock. And there will be some downpours and heavier thunderstorms with that as it pushes eastward. And then the front just kind of lines up from Boston to New York City to Philadelphia to Washington and inches offshore as Michael gets pushed along to the northeast and begins to accelerate away. And there you have it. So this late afternoon run today did manage to bring some of the heavier rains up into central and south Jersey and kind of just touching the south shore of Long Island. It really, and at this point, it could also very well be either post-tropical or on its way to being post-tropical. It reminded me today of the last couple of winters where we've had these storms that we've had to adjust north and west as they moved up the coast. So you wonder if there might be a 50 or 60 mile shift at the last minute. It would mean prolonging the rain and heavy downpours and pushing it a little bit further to the northwest. It doesn't change the ultimate outcome in that it moves out to the east and goodbye. And then after that, we are going to see some nice cool air. And in fact, If you look at the NAM during Friday night, it's showing some snow there in parts of central Indiana, a cold rain and snow shower activity, however light it might be, but it is indicating that with an upper air disturbance that's going to move through Saturday morning with clouds and a couple of showers, and then we get into that colder air and begin what I believe is going to be a long stretch of cooler than average temperatures that are going to be dominating the weather in the eastern two-thirds of the U.S. Whoops, I didn't want to do that yet. So why don't we look at the GFS and how the GFS is playing this tonight. And, the GFS has been a little bit further northwest than all the models lately with this. I noticed the European actually came in a little further northwest. So it does make for a bit of a close call here Thursday night into Friday morning with a fairly wrapped up little low there off the Delmarva Peninsula. There will be some gusty winds on Friday here, especially for coastal Long Island and coastal New Jersey on southward into Delaware and into Virginia as this low moves out to the northeast. It gets it very close. You see that stripe there? It's hard to tell how much of that is from the tropical system and how much of that is actually getting enhanced by the cold front, which is pretty much sitting on top of this until it goes by. And then the front then just whips southward, and that cool air goes all the way down. And moving forward into next week, we have another weather front coming through that may or may not stall out for Tuesday before a wave could develop out here. We'll see what that entails before we get maybe another cold front that's setting up here in the northern plains on up later Tuesday. That'll come in later next week. But I'm pretty convinced that we are going to be in a long haul cooler than average pattern and finally get out of this seemingly unrelenting humidity. Here's the upper air, just to give you an idea with that overwhelming trough. You can see how it gets kicked along to the northeast, and then gradually the trough just overwhelms the jet stream, strengthens all across the eastern part of the United States, and kicks it out. The ridge is gone at this point. The first trough pulls out. The next trough kind of swings into southeastern Canada before we get a stronger trough that comes back in for later next week. See, the upper high just kind of makes a reappearance off the southeast coast, but it's not going to have much luck in building because of the next trough getting in the way. So, there's really not too much more we can say with this. Put up the rainfall, total rainfall that the models are generating, and oftentimes with tropical systems, as we know, they tend to underdo. The rainfall, you can see where the heavier rains of, say, 2 to 5 inches, which could easily wind up being 50 to 75% higher than what the model forecasts in this stripe that runs through Georgia and on up into interior South and North Carolina. Not too much near the coast, because as the storm moves further north and it begins to make this transition from tropical to non-tropical or extratropical, you start to see the heavy rain shield shift to the north and northwest of the low center, because it starts to look like a winter storm, where south and east you get a warm sector and just maybe some showery rains with the cold front that would be with it. We're not at that stage now, but as it makes that transition to the extratropical storm, this is what usually happens, and you wind up with the heaviest rains shifting to the west side, and the strongest winds also can wind up being more on the west side than on the east side of the low. But the rainfall amounts are pretty generous, that are close to the track of the actual surface low center, representative of Michael. And on the NAM late this afternoon, it kind of cut it back a little bit. The 2-inch plus rains were further north and west. It's got some stripes here of 2-inch plus rains north and west of central New Jersey, just offshore Long Island. But that could easily come from all the shower and thunderstorm activity that'll come through later tomorrow afternoon into tomorrow night. I'm a little bit tired today, folks, so my brain's just a bit fried through all of this. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to I'll come right up to the chat board here and join everybody and address some of your questions and comments, because truly, one of the other things that's really important with regards to what happened with respect to Hurricane Michael and its development, there was a feeling that forecasters were basically behind the eight ball all along, watching this strengthen and just basically having to catch up. We are always striving to be what I would say refer to as being ahead of the curve. It was very difficult to get ahead of the curve with this, and there was skepticism going forward, and rightfully so. Forecasters are straddling a fine line, and I was one of those skeptical forecasters, not from the standpoint of development, but from the standpoint of whether it was going to get to anything as extreme as it did, and this all came over a holiday weekend. So a number of folks said, a number of comments from different people saying this is not getting the coverage that it should be getting. When we talked about it, we were talking about it on Monday and Tuesday, and a part of the reason, I think the big reason why that is the case is the fact that we had all that political stuff going on late last week with the Supreme Court nomination. So I don't want to get political about that at all. I'm just saying that took up the news front and center everywhere, and weather just kind of got pushed back on the back burner. So this sort of snuck in to a certain extent, and it goes to show this is one of those instances where we weren't watching a system for 7 or 8 days before it made landfall. This was fast, and there was that. I want to also address another thing. I saw a CNN clickbait post, because that's what it was, saying that implying that storms strengthening Michael had strengthened from a tropical depression to a tropical storm to a hurricane relatively quickly, and they wrote the headline to imply that this was something that never happened before. And my response, I tweeted them back that this is utter bull, and then fill in the second part of that word, okay? And it was utter bull. Storms have strengthened. In fact, if you can find in the archives the advisories for Camille when it first formed, I believe one of the first advisories, though it was up, it didn't even, I don't think they even started it as a tropical depression. I believe they started it as a tropical storm with winds of 70 miles an hour on the first advisory. So, and Camille developed very, very quickly from a tropical wave to a hurricane in a very short period of time. So it happens, okay? And I don't think, what was the necessity of doing clickbait? I have no idea. Tornado 1994 to Chad Crawford as well about mammatus and clouds indicating tornadic activity. There's going to be a lot of that tonight. Make no mistake that there is going to be a lot. Specifically, Chad Crawford, I dreamed, the cabinet nomination, blinded and didn't see the hurricane coming up the coast. Well, I guess we can. I guess that's one theory. I'm not going to argue with you about it, but it certainly did create a distraction, and also the fact, I think, that it was the Columbus Day holiday weekend. It was a 3-day holiday weekend, with Monday being a federal holiday. So there was less attention, I think, than there otherwise would have been, and it may have caught a lot of people flat-footed. I have my uncle, and I have to try and call him, and a lot of communication is down in that area, so you may not even be able, if you have family you need to get in touch with, you may have a difficult time getting through because of the fact that a lot of communication cell towers, etc., are down. And by the way, there's a video on my Facebook page that was taken by a group of, I think it's the Ohio storm chasers, of a house literally exploding with that wind. I happen to think, by the way, I've seen some of the video of the damage. I haven't seen all of it, and certainly I'm not hands-on. I'm not there, and I don't have the the expertise to figure out, just how strong those winds were. But I'm going to guess that when it's all said and done, you'll probably wind up seeing this system maybe upgraded to a Category 5 making landfall once all the damage is assessed. That's just a guess on my part. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I don't think it takes away from the fact that this is at all the fact that this was one historic storm that we've seen here in the Florida Panhandle, and it will be their signature generational event. So Harvey for Texas, Andrew for South Florida, Sandy for my neck of the woods, Katrina for Louisiana, and now for the Florida Panhandle, it will be Michael will be the go-to storm in everybody's mind the next time there is a hurricane threat for the Florida Panhandle. Just trying to get here. Nicole, you're in Gwinnett, Georgia. Will I get hit? Okay. You need to tell me where Gwinnett, Georgia is. Is it near Atlanta? Is it in the northern part of the state, southern part of the state? If you could let me know, I will, try to look it up here. Gwinnett, Gwinnet. Hang on. I'm only seeing the chats now. I didn't. G. T. I'm looking it up off screen. I'm trying to see where it is. Gwinnett County. Looks like you are just east of Atlanta. So you're getting northeast of Atlanta. I mean, you're certainly going to get rain out of this, and there will be some heavier downpours. And because of the fact that you're dealing with this tropical system and the nature of it all, there may be some severe weather that might be popping up here and there. So bear that in mind. But also bear in mind that it's going to be fast in terms of the duration here. We're talking about 8 to 12 hours before it's all said and done. So I hope that answers your question. I'm sorry it took so long. Cynthia Guignautis, yes, hard to believe that Central PA may just escape this one this time. Yeah, the front times out that's coming across, it looks like the development will be more in eastern Pennsylvania and through New Jersey and over me, and less so over you, although I do think you'll probably get at least some downpours from the front, but you're not going to get anything from Michael at all. And Johnny Quest, you may be far enough west, you'll probably see something out of this in terms of rainfall, but again, it'll be fast, and you know what? All that cool, dry air that's coming in and the big pattern change will give you a nice long time to finally dry out that swamp. Chris Alley, good to see you, and Chris can attest to the fact of what Hurricane Sandy did where he lives on Long Island in southwest Suffolk County, because that was one of the worst flooding episodes for southwest Suffolk County and into Nassau County from any tropical storm or hurricane that has impacted my neck of the woods. Let's see. I'm just running through your chats, your posts. And I really appreciate it, by the way. It's always good. I really am trying, I love it when everybody gets on board and, expresses their opinion or asks questions or you talk to each other. I think that's a really, really good thing. Let's see. Hi, Joe. Is this the end of all the hurricanes or the next 3 weeks? Well, look, once you get past the middle part of October, hurricane activity does drop rather quickly. It does take a sharp drop, and a lot of that's going to depend on this pattern going forward and how far south the cool Canadian air extends. Usually what happens is when you get that first solid frontal cold front to push through the Gulf of Mexico, that kind of shuts off the hurricane season for that area. I certainly could not rule out the possibility that there might not be some more systems popping up. By the way, we still have Leslie that is still out there, and it's going to be out there for another week probably, out in the central Atlantic. It was going to move east, reach almost to the Canary Islands, and then turn back west and probably come all the way back to west of 50 degrees west before eventually it does get picked up by a trough out in the Atlantic. Robert B. Andrew wasn't boosted to a Category 5 until 10 years later. They do go back and do post-analysis of this of these storms. And yeah, and Andrew, by pressure, was down in, I think the lowest pressure in Andrew was 924 or 923. But it was a very, very small hurricane. It was a buzzsaw. I mean, literally, it was a buzzsaw. You had to be fairly close to the center to experience the devastation that occurred, which happened over Homestead, Florida. But it was a small system. This one was much larger, clearly, and the Hurricane Center does go back and they look at all the data. So I wouldn't at all be shocked if you wind up that this winds up being brought up to a Category 5. Philip Neary, do I think they will categorize it as a 5? The 920 threshold as it was 910. Yeah, they used to have, the pressure part. It was the main part of the criteria, and then they just went straight to the wind. Then they've gotten where they've got the wind at 131 is Category 4, and at 130 is a 3. But yet, when they've put up advisories with maximum sustained winds of 130, they're calling those Category 4 hurricanes. I mean, where do you draw? Where do you put the line? Okay, the line has to go winds up having to go somewhere. But, where do you exactly draw it? And on the Category 5, I believe the number is 157 for a Cat 5. So, and since they do everything in 5-mile-an-hour increments, it would be 155 is a 4, but 160 would be a 5. Look, it was close enough, in my view, coupled with the pressure, and certainly from what I'm seeing visually on video so far, that it was probably a 5 at landfall. But I'll let the Hurricane Center folks and the analysis folks do their job and figure that out. Do you think we'll have leaves falling, lots of trees dying? Bender Fisher, where are you located? When you say lots of trees are dying, I'm not sure. There are some areas in the Northeast that have been having problems with a fungus that's been going around with oak trees, and then a couple of years ago it was maple. And even birch, I believe, also was having some issues. So if you could be a little more specific by what you mean by trees dying, but you will see this pattern we're going into should help accelerate the leaf change across the eastern U.S. over the next couple of weeks. Would have expected it to be a higher number. Looking at flattened homes, Joyce Mack. Just remember, you got you can take videos at different spots. You're going to wind up seeing different things, and a lot of it probably hasn't even reached the screen yet. So I'm sure we're going to see some extensive damage. Tender Fisher, so you're up in Fishkill. Okay, they're dying from lack. They certainly can't be dying from lack of rainfall. But I know my colleague Joe Rayo pointed out back about a month or so ago that the trees seem to be doing what they're supposed to do with regards to getting ready to shed their leaves. Shelly Man Studios, yes, Cat 5 does start technically at 157, and Michael on the advisory was 155. But I'm thinking that in post analysis they may wind up making that a Category 5. That's just a guess on my part. All weather, no. What radios? I probably pretty much covered what you're commenting. The Maples. There's Bender Fisher. The Maples may be responding. There's a bit of disease running around. It ran around Long Island about 2 or 3 years ago that took a whole bunch of maple trees, including one of mine. That could be what's causing some of the maple trees to die off. And they were worried earlier this summer because there was some kind of oak tree fungus that was going around and killing off some of the oak trees on Long Island as well. The NAM has consistently a better handle on the northern and western rain shield. You make a good point, Doug, because I started thinking back to the last few winters, as I said earlier, with respect to having to adjust forecasts because of the fact that the models at the last minute kept shifting these coastal storms further west. So I think that's a valid point. On this latest run, at least for me, it just kind of keeps me very, very close to the edge of the rainfall. So, well, hopefully that'll be that. We'll get it through, and then we'll be finished. I do have WPCs forecast map, and I'll bring that up to the front here. Most of this is front end loaded. In other words, this is all coming. This is a 7-day forecast, but what you see here in the east is all front end loaded across Georgia. They're forecasting, basic 5-inch plus amounts in the oranges. We're getting, I get into the 2 to 3 inch range, but again, some of that as you go up into New England and in the Northeast, and the rain should be significant all the way up into northern New England, is being caused by this cold front that's coming through, and it's not necessarily, it's not really Michael related. Once you get down from Delaware on southward and westward, that is all going to be Michael related for the most part, and then only a small part with the cold front that is moving through. Looks like also some solid rain across the southern plains and back through Texas. And this tongue of rain that you see coming in out of the Pacific across Baja California and trying to push its way into the southwest, that is Hurricane Sergio in the Pacific, which is still around, and it will be taking a track similar to Rosa that it took last week, only it'll be a little further south, and that's going to bring in more rains into parts of the southwest late this week and into the weekend. So I think at this point I am going to leave it at that. I took a week's vacation to kind of recharge my batteries and recharge my brain, and these last couple of days have already. I'm already begging for my next round of days off and vacation, but they're not going to come until the end of the month. Is there a map for Blue Dog 28 of the storm surge impact for the Mexico Beach, Port St. Joe area? I mean, the storm inundation tool on the Hurricane Center's website, nhc.noaa.gov, but that's a forecast from earlier, which was forecasting a large part of that area east of Mexico Beach to Apalachicola and further east was going to see 9 feet of water above ground and extending pretty far inland. But I haven't seen yet any maps in terms of what the extent of the storm surge has been. You might want to plow around on Twitter. People will be put up all sorts of maps all the time, or check on Google to see if anything's popped up yet. I kind of think you might just have to wait a little bit until we get a day or two past this, and then I'm sure you're going to start to see some of the surge numbers. But it had to be at least enough to bring at least 9 feet of water above the ground, well inland of the coastal areas. Mickey, we addressed the question of Michael 4 maybe going into a 5. That will be done in post analysis. William Uber, I need to recharge and I got to do it by going fishing. I totally agree. I'm thinking this weekend, because the weather's going to be nice and cool, I may do some freshwater fishing over in Blydenburg. If I can get my fishing buddy Phil Buzz and my other fishing buddy Howie Dwyer, and maybe John Sears, and the 4 of us will go and do a little fishing. We'll see. But yeah, definitely need a battery recharge after these last 3 days. All right. I'm going to cut it short at this point. Thanks, everybody, for being here. There's additional coverage on my Patreon page. That goes on. So for those of you who haven't joined yet, just going to put the link up if you're interested here. Here's the link to my Patreon platform. It's a subscription platform, just a couple of bucks a month at the price of a cup of coffee. And you get all weather all the time, no ads, exclusive videos, exclusive posts, and you can talk to me at any time. You message me, I will get back to you in a very timely fashion. We will have the Joe and Joe Weather Show tonight on Facebook at 9:15 Eastern Time on my Facebook page, meteorologist Joe Chaffee. So by all means, join us there. Thanks, Scott Bruller, for the cheerlead there to get me to 100 patrons. Like the walleye, it's Chad Crawford. I haven't caught one yet, but that's on my list, my to-do list and my goal list to catch a walleye. And they actually do have some walleye out around where I live. So one of these days I'm gonna go out there and set my pole up the right way and keep my fingers crossed that I nail one. So we got the Joe and Joe Show tonight at 9:15. I will upload it to you. I actually will upload it. Patreon members will get to see it. We'll get to see it first, Israel. So it'll be uploaded and sent to them first, and then sent out to everybody else a little bit later on. Yes, and I do like salmon, by the way, and I will and trout fishing. That's also on my list. All right, you guys are keeping me from saying goodbye. All right, let's see. I'm just trying to think. Schedule tomorrow, of course, with tropical storm warnings up and down the Carolinas. We'll probably get a live stream at some point tomorrow morning, and then again tomorrow evening. Although I'll see how I feel tomorrow morning when I get up. And the Patreon members, you will get your live video tomorrow. As we'll get back to that. I've been this week. I've been the morning video. I've made it public for everybody else, but I think you know tomorrow we may wind up just doing a morning video for Patreon members only, and then the nighttime YouTube live stream will be open to the public. And I think that's about it. So we will see you tomorrow, or if hopefully we'll see you tonight on the Joe and Joe Show on Facebook. Have a great evening, everybody. And if you're watching from down where Michael is having impact, please stay safe and be very cautious. Don't take chances. The stuff you have is fixable. Your life isn't. So you know you don't want to do something that is foolish and puts your life in danger. Have a great evening, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.